In the previous video, we provided an overview of the photovoltaic industry. This video will focus on distributed photovoltaic power stations, which are more feasible for ordinary entrepreneurs, with a particular emphasis on analyzing their revenue and costs. The upstream costs of a photovoltaic power station primarily consist of purchasing PV modules, which account for half or even more of the total investment. Site leasing costs vary significantly by region, but generally make up around 10% of expenses. Other equipment such as inverters and mounting structures contribute approximately 25%, while installation and miscellaneous costs account for the remaining 15%. The prices of raw materials for PV power stations fluctuate, so the construction cost can only be estimated within a range of approximately 40 to 55 cents per watt. Taking a 10 kilowatts residential distributed PV system as an example, at 55 cents per watt, the total construction cost would be around $5,500. Here's some useful information. A 10 kilowatts PV system means it can generate 10 kilowatts per hour under optimal sunlight conditions. Residential electricity prices average 7 cents per kilowatt, while industrial rates are slightly higher at 10 cents per kilowatt. In this example, if all the electricity generated by the household system is self-consumed, the theoretical hourly revenue would be 70 cents. However, due to factors like surplus grid sales, insufficient sunlight, and panel degradation, the actual average hourly earnings will certainly be lower than 70 cents. From these calculations, we can see that residential distributed PV systems typically require only a few $1,000s in investment, while commercial and industrial distributed PV systems vary in cost depending on the scale of the partner enterprise, generally ranging from hundreds of thousands of dollars. This investment range of several thousand to several $100,000 is within reach for ordinary entrepreneurs, which is why we've chosen to focus on distributed PV systems for our analysis. Generally speaking, distributed PV systems have an IRR of around 10%, with a payback period of 6 to 10 years. Assuming a system lifespan of 25 years, the income from the last 15 years can be considered nearly pure profit. We say nearly because there may still be minor annual maintenance costs, and core components like inverters typically need replacement every 5 to 10 years. However, overall, once the power station is built, it becomes an asset with stable and predictable cash flow, requiring relatively low subsequent maintenance and personnel costs. It's worth noting that a key factor affecting the payback period is the revenue generated by the power station. Several core factors influence this revenue. First, the ratio of self-consumption to surplus grid sales. Typically, self-consumption yields significantly higher returns than surplus grid sales. Second, the amount of sunlight resources available, which depends on regional and environmental factors. Third, electricity selling prices, which vary across different regions. Let's discuss another topic. Can distributed PV power stations be scaled up? While we could invest our own capital to build a single station for long-term returns, turning power station construction into a large-scale business would essentially mean entering a capital-intensive industry. After all, most individual entrepreneurs lack the financial capacity to fund multiple stations entirely with their own capital. Fortunately, financial institutions in China generally view PV power stations favorably for debt financing, as they offer predictable cash flows and use the PV equipment itself as collateral, providing both primary and secondary repayment sources. At smaller scales, obtaining traditional bank loans without property collateral can be challenging. In such cases, partnering with financial leasing companies is often a viable alternative, typically allowing financing of about 70% of the equipment value. This leverage enables entrepreneurs to expand their operations. Of course, any entrepreneurial venture carries risks. Let's examine some critical risk factors. First, enterprise risk. If our partner enterprise, for example, a factory goes bankrupt or downsizes, their electricity consumption will decrease, forcing us to sell more power to the grid at lower rates. This makes thorough due diligence on potential partners essential before investment. Second, physical damage. Natural disasters or accidents could render the equipment worthless overnight, making comprehensive insurance coverage crucial. Third, technological obsolescence. The PV industry has seen rapid technological advancement in recent years, with costs falling dramatically while conversion efficiency improves continuously. This resembles the electronics industry, much like how today's computers vastly outperform decade-old models at similar price points. There's a real risk that future technological breakthroughs could make older stations obsolete and depreciate rapidly. Fourth, competing clean energy. Breakthroughs in alternative clean energy technologies, particularly nuclear fusion, though not commercially viable in the short term, could potentially disrupt the PV industry in the medium to long term. Our recent videos have objectively presented both the advantages and risks of distributed PV stations for entrepreneurs' reference. We believe this business model offers a balanced risk-reward profile, with startup costs ranging from thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. It remains accessible to ordinary entrepreneurs, while the favorable financing environment creates opportunities for scaling up operations. If you're considering a venture in China, reach out via email. We're a consultancy specializing in business analysis. bizchinapanda@gmail.com